And welcome to your daily word. It is Friday, June the 5th, and we are in John chapter 12 with our annual reading plan today. And as you look at the various events that you're going to read, there are some things I want you to notice today and understand, and that I want to impact your heart. I've made a short list, and for this entire chapter, one scholar theologian has called it the centerpiece of the gospel, preparation of the Passover lamb for glorification. That's really what is being set up here as Jesus journeys on his way to the cross. Some interesting things to note: how people react to Jesus. How people react to Jesus. In verses 1 to 8, we have Mary, who takes a pound of expensive ointment in verse 3, made from pure nard, anoints the feet of Jesus, wipes his feet with her hair. The house is filled with the perfume. And Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples who would eventually betray him, says, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you will always have with you, but you do not always have me." You have two very distinct views of Jesus. You have Mary cherishing, worshiping. You have Judas really overlooking, eventually betraying, greedy, and missing what was right in front of him. Another beautiful contrast, though a sad one, but beautiful to see how this whole picture is shaping up, is Jesus is going about his business. He's doing what he came to do, and those old Jews, the high priests, are still scheming. They're trying to undo the work that Jesus has done. And in verses 9 to 11, they're trying to find a way to kill Lazarus. Stop right there, and not to overdo this point, but I can't help but think of how many times we see God doing something great. He is moving mighty in ministry, and there are people, much like the chief priests, who are used by the enemy, or maybe even in their own ignorance and sin, and they attempt to undo ministry, or because of their actions, they actually do undo ministry. The beautiful thing is, much like Jesus's journey to the cross, it can't be stopped. Jesus is building his church. He's going to do what he's going to do. He's plowing, planting, sowing, exploding a harvest. And sure, there might be setbacks, and there may be some people like the chief priests that are always trying to kill what God has raised up. But his work can't be stopped. I love that. That's why that's a beautiful moment to me, even though it seems a little messed up that they're trying to kill Lazarus right after Jesus raised him from the dead. Another one, the triumphal entry in verses 12 to 19. The same people crying Hosanna will very soon cry out, "Crucify him, crucify him." There's Greeks who are seeking after Jesus, and they say something that I've actually seen on the backside of some pulpits. They say, "Sir," in speaking to Philip, "we wish to see Jesus." These Greeks wanted to see the Master, and we too should want to see the Master. And in our preaching, in our living, we should emulate that heart and that desire. "Sir, we wish to see Jesus. Show us, lead us to, guide us to Jesus." Verses 27 and onward, you have some pretty interesting moments that are happening in which a voice from heaven says, "I have glorified my name, and I'll glorify it again." Jesus praying, "Father, glorify your name." The crowd stands there, hears it in verse 29, because it thundered from the sky. Can you imagine hearing God the Father from the sky like that? They must have been shook to the core. Another says, "An angel has spoken to him." Jesus answered, "This voice has come for your sake, not mine." So often, it's interesting, Jesus allows these moments, or we see in John's gospel certain moments happening for those who are watching or now reading, like the blind man in John 9. He is not blind because sin. He's blind so that God may be glorified in the healing. And here, Jesus has a very personal moment with the Father, but in the end, he says, "It's for your sake." So you can really see who I am. You could see what's going on here. I'm going to be glorified. The Father is going to be glorified. That's what is going to be accomplished here. And then another key moment, we see the unbelief of people who do not believe. In verses 42 to 43, after John explains that he had done many signs in verse 37, and so many did not believe in him still, in verse 42 he says, "Nevertheless, many even of the authorities believed in him, but for fear of the Pharisees they did not confess it, so that they would not be put out of the synagogue. For they love the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God." What a powerful truth. They believed that he was Jesus, but their people-pleasing, their desire for the glory of man, and the approval of the synagogue and their fellow chief priests and high-ranking officials outranked their desire to serve Jesus. There's a lesson there for us as well, and an application. Do you believe? Yes. Are you living in a way that pushes aside people-pleasing, that pushes aside acceptance from the world, as long as you are accepted by God? If you're like me, you struggle sometimes with pleasing people and wanting to make everything okay and not wanting to upset people. But in the end, together we must wrestle to the final truth, which is we choose God pleasing over man pleasing any day of the week, any hour of the week. We must seek out and desire the glory that comes from God, not man. And then in the final section, Jesus speaking with the Father's authority and affirmed that he speaks not on his own authority in verse 49, but the Father. That's the authority that he comes with. He had and still has all of heaven with him and backing him. The question we can ask ourselves when we read through a beautiful chapter like that is, are we with him? Are we behind him? Are we serving him? Are we loving him? Again, no big surprises from John. It's all about Jesus. Are you all about Jesus?